before there were farms, before there were villages, before anyone woke up wondering if the wheat was ready to harvest, there was a much simpler question. Can we find anything to eat today? For most of human history, that question greeted people almost every single morning. So tonight, let us travel back, not hundreds of years, but tens of thousands of years. The world looks very different. There are no roads, no bakeries with warm bread in the window, no grocery stores open 24 hours a day, not even a tiny cupboard hiding a forgotten biscuit. Instead, there are forests, rivers, open grasslands, and long winters that seem to last forever. You wake as the sun begins to rise. The air is cold. Your family sleeps close together around the remains of last night's fire. Your stomach already feels empty, but that is nothing unusual. It often feels that way. Breakfast is not waiting. Breakfast has to be found. For our ancient ancestors, hunger was not a rare event. It was a familiar companion. Sometimes it whispered gently. Sometimes it shouted loudly. But it almost never disappeared for long. These early humans lived as hunter-gatherers. They survived by hunting wild animals, catching fish, collecting berries, digging up roots, gathering nuts, and finding anything else that nature was willing to share. Some days were wonderful. A successful hunt might provide enough meat for everyone. There would be smiles around the fire, stories told late into the evening, and children falling asleep with full stomachs. Other days were much less exciting. Imagine walking for hours while tracking a deer, only for it to disappear over a hill. Then imagine doing that again tomorrow. Even the world's greatest hunter cannot convince a deer to stand still and wait politely. Nature was not known for its customer service. Food depended on luck, skill, teamwork, and the changing seasons. If berries had not ripened yet, there were no berries. If the fish moved elsewhere, dinner simply swam away. If heavy snow covered the ground, even finding edible plants became difficult. Every season brought its own challenges. Spring could be especially hard. Winter food stores were gone, but new plants had not fully grown. Animals were thin after surviving the cold months, making hunting even more difficult. Summer often brought more choices. Forests became greener. Fruits appeared. Rivers filled with fish. Birds nested, offering eggs to anyone lucky enough to find them first. Autumn was a busy time. Families gathered nuts, seeds, and fruits as quickly as they could. Everyone knew winter was coming, and winter had a habit of arriving exactly when nobody wanted it to. Then came winter itself. The forest became quiet. Plants disappeared beneath frost and snow. Animals moved away or became hard to catch. Every successful hunt mattered even more. It is easy to imagine ancient people as fearless hunters who always returned carrying enormous animals over their shoulders. The truth was much less dramatic. Many hunts failed. In fact, failure was expected. A group might spend an entire day tracking prey and return home with nothing except sore feet and disappointed faces. That meant everyone simply had to wait for tomorrow. Hunger also taught people one very important lesson. Sharing could keep everyone alive. If one hunter was lucky today, another might be lucky next week. Food shared today might be returned many days later. This was not just kindness, it was survival. Scientists believe this habit of sharing food helped humans become unusually cooperative compared to many other animals. Around the evening fire, meat was divided carefully. Elders received portions. Children were fed. Skilled hunters often shared with the entire group, rather than eating everything themselves. After all, one person cannot eat an entire deer before it spoils. Well, they could certainly try, but it probably would not end well. Children learned these lessons early. They watched adults search for food, prepare simple meals, and recognize which plant were safe and which could make someone very sick. That knowledge was priceless. One mistake could turn dinner into a very bad idea. Gathering food was often just as important as hunting. Many people picture prehistoric life as endless mammoth hunts, but much of the daily food came from plants. Women, children, and older members of the group gathered berries, roots, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, and edible leaves. These foods may not sound exciting compared to giant mammoth, but they were dependable. A mammoth might feed the group for days. A handful of berries could keep someone going long enough to reach tomorrow. Life also depended on knowing the land. People remember where certain trees grew when fruits became ripe, where fish gathered, and which rivers stayed full during dry seasons. There were no maps. The landscape itself became the map. Every hill, stream, and valley held memories of meals found, or meals missed. Of course, hunger did more than make stomachs growl. It shaped the human body itself. Our ancestors evolved in a world where food came and went. Because of this, the human body became remarkably good at storing extra energy whenever food was available. Finding a large meal after several hungry days was not unusual. Eating plenty during those moments made perfect sense because nobody knew when the next feast would come. In many ways, our bodies still remember that ancient world. Even today, our brains often encourage us to enjoy high-energy foods whenever we find them. Long ago, this was a useful survival trick. Nobody could predict the next successful hunt. Ancient hunger also changed how people thought. Patience became necessary. Waiting was part of life. Waiting for berries to ripen. Waiting for animals to return. Waiting for winter to end. Waiting for luck. Modern life teaches us to expect food almost instantly. Ancient life taught the opposite. Sometimes the only thing to do was wait together around the fire and hope tomorrow would be kinder. Slowly, over thousands upon thousands of years, people began noticing something remarkable. Seeds dropped near camps sometimes grew into new plants. Certain places produced food again and again. Perhaps, instead of following food across a landscape, food could be encouraged to stay. It was a simple idea, but it would become one of the biggest changes in human history. People would begin planting instead of only gathering. They would build homes instead of moving with the seasons. They would create farms, villages, and eventually great civilizations. For thousands of years, people followed food. Then, little by little, they tried something completely different. They asked a very bold question. What if the food stayed here instead? It sounds simple now. Plant a seed, wait a while, and enjoy the harvest. But for the first farmers, nothing about it was simple. They were stepping into a brand new way of life without any instruction book. No friendly neighbor could explain the best planting season. There were no weather reports, no tractors, not even a scarecrow with an impressive hat. Just hope, hard work, and a lot of guessing. Around 12,000 years ago, in different parts of the world, people slowly began to settle down. Instead of moving from place to place, they built homes that lasted longer than a single season. They planted wheat, barley, millet, rice, and other crops, depending on where they lived. At first, it must have felt almost magical. A handful of tiny seeds disappeared into the ground. Weeks later, green shoots pushed through the soil. A few months after that, there was enough grain to feed an entire family. It probably seemed like the answer to one of humanity's oldest problems. No more wandering across endless hills looking for berries. No more chasing animals for days. The future looked a little more certain, or so it seemed, because farming solved one problem while creating several brand new ones. A hunter could search somewhere else if today's valley was empty. A farmer could not pick up an entire wheat field and move it somewhere with better weather. Once the seeds were planted, everyone simply had to wait and hope for rain, hope for sunshine, hope that insects would find someone else's field more interesting, hope that hungry birds had already eaten breakfast somewhere else, hope that wild animals stayed out of the garden, hope that nothing unexpected happened. Nature, however, has always enjoyed surprises. Some years brought too much rain. The fields became muddy lakes. Young plants drowned before they had the chance to grow. Farmers watched days of careful work disappear beneath floodwater, unable to do much except wait for the skies to clear. Other years brought the opposite problem. The rain never came. The ground cracked beneath the hot sun. Tiny green plants turned brown long before harvest. Rivers became shallow. Wells dried up. Every cloud drifting across the sky became a reason to stop working for a moment and look up with quiet hope. Sometimes the clouds kept moving. Sometimes they forgot to rain at all. Then there were the insects. Tiny creatures, barely noticed on most days, could become a farmer's greatest enemy. A field that looked healthy one week might suddenly be filled with hungry bugs chewing through leaves and stems. Imagine spending months growing your dinner, only to discover that millions of insects had already made reservations. They were very rude dinner guests. Rodents caused trouble too. Mice and rats found grain just as delicious as people did. Once farmers began storing food, these clever little animals suddenly had a reason to visit. They slipped into storage pits, chewed through baskets, and helped themselves to supplies meant to last the entire winter. Cats would eventually become very popular roommates for exactly this reason. Farmers also learned another difficult lesson. Harvest did not last forever. Fresh grain had to survive many months before the next growing season. That meant building storage places that stayed dry and safe. Some villages dug deep storage pits into the ground. Others built raised granaries where grain stayed above damp soil. These early storage buildings became some of the most valuable places in the entire settlement. Inside them was not just food. Inside them was tomorrow. Every handful of grain represented weeks of hard work. Families became surprisingly careful with every basket. Children probably heard the ancient version of, "Don't spill that." Unlike modern kitchens, there was no quick trip to replace what had been wasted. If grain spoiled because of moisture, mold, or pests, there was no second chance. Winter would arrive whether the storage bins were full or empty. As villages grew larger, people started depending on one another more than ever before. Not everyone needed to hunt anymore. Some people became potters. Others made tools from stone or bone. Some built homes. Others cared for animals like goats, sheep, pigs, or cattle. This new way of living created stronger communities. It also created a new kind of risk. If the harvest failed, almost everyone suffered together. A hunter living alone might have a bad week. An entire farming village could have a bad year. That difference changed everything. Food became something people planned months in advance. Planting season became one of the busiest times of the year. Every family hurried into the fields while conditions were just right. Missing the proper season could mean waiting an entire year to try again. Imagine making one mistake in April and not getting another chance until the following spring. That is a lot of pressure for a bag of seeds. Harvest season was just as important. The whole village often worked together, cutting grain before storms could flatten the fields. Everyone understood that speed mattered. A single week of heavy rain at the wrong time could ruin months of effort. No wonder harvest festivals became such joyful celebrations. People were not only celebrating food, they were celebrating survival. Many early communities also believed that good harvest depended on forces beyond human control. They thanked gods, spirits, ancestors, or the earth itself for successful crops. Ceremonies, songs, and offerings became part of farming life. Whether these traditions changed the weather or not, they certainly gave people hope during uncertain times. Hope was valuable. Sometimes it was almost as important as bread. Over the centuries, farmers became better at reading the land. They noticed which soils were richer. They learned when rivers flooded. They discovered that some seeds grew better than others. Knowledge slowly replaced some of the guessing, but never all of it. Even today, farmers know that nature always gets the final vote. Point one storm can ignore months of careful planning. Point one drought can test even the most experienced grower. Those lessons began with the very first fields. Still, despite every risk, people kept farming. Why? Because when everything went well, farming could feed far more people than hunting and gathering ever could. Villages became towns. Towns became cities. Cities became kingdoms.